Welcome to Type Tune Tint. I'm Tom Kranz. Join me as today we take a walk back in time to a world of sci-fi and fantasy in a Victorian wrapper. You may have heard of steampunk, but what is it? Today's guest, Stephen Beale, has the answer, and it's a little more multi-layered than you might think. Stephen is a lifelong journalist who knows a lot about tech and is the writer and webmaster of the authoritative Steampunk Explorer website. He also crafts a regular video news segment called
The World of Steampunk.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Stephen Beale, who, for the sake of transparency, is my brother-in-law. Stephen is a native Philadelphian like me. I've known him since I've known my wife, Mary Ann, because they're brother and sister. We're going on 43 years together, so that means I've known Steve for over 40 years. Steve, hello. I hope it's not
Hello,
as hot
Tom.
in El Cerrito as it is here in New Jersey.
Oh, maybe you don't want to know. I'm looking at my computer. It says it's 60 degrees.
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to know. We're like on day 3 of a heat wave here and high humidity and thunderstorms and all that stuff. Steampunk is something that it's always kind of been around in my psyche. I've never really dived into it until I found out that Steve was into it. And Steve hasn't been into it all his life. I think it came to you maybe in the last few years or so. But what I wanted to do was, since I never really knew what it meant, I dug up the Wikipedia definition. I'm just going to read the first couple sentences here. Steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction that incorporates retro-futuristic technology and aesthetics inspired by 19th century industrial steam-powered machinery. Steampunk works are often set in an alternative history of the Victorian era or the American Wild West. How do you feel about that definition?
Steampunk is more than just a genre now. It started out as a literary genre, but now it's a whole subculture. So there are events and there are games. Some people these days describe it more as an aesthetic. And also, some people object to the to tying it too closely to what you'd call the Victorian era. I think it's more accurate to say the 19th century and early 20th century. The reason being, there's a lot of sensitivity about this in steampunk because of some concerns that some people have rightly raised that the late 19th century was a time of colonialism, and particularly the Victorians. They were colonizers, and in many cases in a very brutal way. And there are steampunk stories that are told not from the standpoint of the colonizers, but from the colonized, and or imagining an alternate future where places like Africa have very advanced civilizations, and maybe the Victorians less so. So there's all kinds of ways of reimagining the past, and that's what steampunk is all about.
I got it. A lot of steampunk deals with not steam as much as it does electricity around the time of Nikola Tesla, right? And like those
Right.
early inventions.
Yeah, he's kind of like a patron saint of steampunk, and he was all about electricity and advances in electrical technology. And there have been movies about him and whatnot. His feud with Thomas Edison and all that. So yeah, the way that I guess what happens is because of the name steampunk, people think it has to have something to do with steam.
Sure.
And the origin of the name was very interesting. So it was coined by an author named K.W. Jeter in 1987. And he had he was part of a trio of authors from Orange County, California, of all places. And they started writing these novels set in Victorian era London. I'll call it Victorian era London because that was the place and the time. And at the time, the hot subgenre in science fiction was cyberpunk, popularized by people like William Gibson and Bruce Sterling and others. That was the hot literary genre. So K.W. Jeter wrote a letter to a science fiction magazine where he was talking about labeling the stories that he and his friends were coming up with, and he said, well, maybe we'll call it steampunk. And it was just a play on cyberpunk, because that was the hot genre at the time, and because it was cyberpunk takes place in kind of in the near future, kind of foretelling the era we're in now, where everyone's connected on computers, and the punk part came in where a lot of the characters were kind of like lowlifes and rebels and that
Oh,
sort of thing.
I was wondering because punk to me seems like such an 80s term that applies to music, you know?
Right. Well, that was the thing. That was when cyberpunk. That's how cyberpunk got its name, and then steampunk was, just sort of wrote off of that. Um, and it's interesting because now, steampunk fans like to have all kinds of debates about the meaning of steampunk and is this or that steampunk. And some people will say, well, if it doesn't have steam, then it's not steampunk, or if it doesn't have punk, it's not steampunk.
Yeah, but as
And
I've seen in a lot of the photographs that you've sent me and a lot of the events you go to, Steam is nowhere to be seen in a lot of these devices. There's a lot of, I mean, there are some, yes,
oh
but a
yeah,
lot of the machines are more kind of just like Rube Goldbergy and some electricity and some hand powered stuff. So
well,
it does seem like it's a fairly broad description that people kind of, co-opt for whatever purpose they have at the moment.
correct. It's very catchy. That's the thing. It's a catchy name. And now there are other punk genres that have emerged since then. Diesel punk, which is set like after World War One,
Mhm.
and Ray punk and Atom punk, all kinds of different punk genres. So, and I guess the thing to know about steampunk gadgets, so to speak, is that most of the time they don't work. They're not like working gadgets. They're models. They're like sculptures. There's a lot of kinetic sculpture in steampunk, but you see someone who's made a steampunk jetpack. You can put it on your back, and it might look really cool, but you're not going to be going flying through the air with it, or anything like that.
Well, I'm showing some of the photographs that you sent me as part of the video version of this podcast here, and you can see some of the stuff is very cool looking. I mean, it almost doesn't matter that it doesn't work. It's like somebody actually, put blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, built it in their basement, I guess, stuck it on a pickup truck, and drove it to an exhibition or a convention.
Well, that all that being said, there are real steam people in the world. They don't necessarily call themselves steampunks. Maybe steam nerds, steam geeks. Someone said, "Well, we're steam dorks." That was their own self-description. But there's an outfit here in the Bay Area called Kinetic Steamworks, and they're machinists and artists, and they make these amazing steam powered contraptions they really work. They're really steam powered. They make their own gears.
Hmm.
They refurbish the engines. One year they had a steam powered pencil sharpener. It's the ultimate Rube Goldberg contraption. It was this huge installation, maybe 20 feet across, and you had the boiler, and you had the gears and pulleys and all this stuff working and working. And at the end was this little, it was like a strap connected to a wheel that was turning a pencil sharpener.
You
Yeah.
mentioned a maker's fair.
Mhm.
Isn't that where you first got interested in this subject matter? Tell us about how
Absolutely.
that happened and like what year and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it's weird because people who know me now uh, I've been a science fiction fan all my life. And so people might assume that I got into it through the literature, but I didn't. I got into it because I had bought a digital camera back around 2011. I was looking for places to go take cool photos. And I did all the Bay Area scenic spots, or Northern California scenic spots, Muir Woods and Golden Gate Bridge and Big Sur and Monterey, all those places. And then I found out about this event called Maker Fair, which is kind of it's hard to describe. It's kind of like on the scale of a county fair, but it's all about do-it-yourself stuff,
Hmm.
do-it-yourself creativity. So people build these wild projects, and they would bring it to Maker Fair and show them off. They had a life-sized mousetrap game was one of their amazing things.
So maker's fair means they're making stuff essentially. Is that where the
Maker,
name? That's where it comes from. Okay.
yeah, and there's this whole thing called the Maker movement, and there was a magazine. There is still a magazine called Make Magazine, and this all kind of grew out of that same seed. And so, and one thing that they had at Maker Fair, and this ties into steampunk, was they had a lot of Burning Man art. So now you want to go to Burning Man, you're spending a week in the desert, and it's not, you don't have all the comforts of home. It's not for everybody. But they have these amazing art installations. A lot of them are pyrotechnic, large scale stuff, mobile, weird. I guess ostensibly you would call them art cars, but the real name at Burning Man is mutant vehicles. And they actually have a department of mutant vehicles at Burning Man that puts license plates on these things so they can drive on the playa. And at Maker Faire, you could see some of this stuff.
And so was one of these vehicles, it was a mock-up of the Nautilus, was it? From the Disney
Right.
the Disney 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea film?
Right. Disney made an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that movie, maybe even more so than the original novel, has been an influence on steampunk, and especially the design of the Nautilus. There's a famed production designer named Harper Goff who who designed it, and and it's become, people make models of it these days. It's just inspired all kinds of steampunk artwork, and one of them was the Nautilus submarine art car, which was some fellow, a very wealthy individual who went to Burning Man, paid a group of artists $500,000 to build this thing,
Huh.
and it's built on an airport tow tractor, an airport tow truck, and it's I think it goes about 10, 12 miles per hour, but it's a vehicle. It's an art car version of the Nautilus submarine.
It actually
And
works. What are there other examples of popular culture that were inspirations for steampunk or that represent steampunk, either in movies or TV?
well, yeah, the Time Machine movie was a big one, and you mentioned TV, of course. The Wild Wild West is now seen as a prototype of steampunk, and
I love
I'm
that
not talking
show.
about the movie. I'm talking about the
Right.
TV series.
Yeah, that was great. So Artemis Gordon, wasn't he the guy who made up all those crazy inventions and some of the stuff that it was almost like early versions of Batman weapons and stuff?
Right, right. And the thing is, the villains were the ones the villain that they were trying to defeat every week had like an even bigger gadget that they were trying to use, in their plot to conquer the world.
So anyway, you went to this first Maker Faire and you took a
Right,
bunch of pictures. And
right.
this was what, in the 80s sometime at some point? I'm sorry,
No,
the
no,
20 to
this
20.
was 2011 was
That's
when
right, 2011. I meant 20.
right. And the thing is, they had a steampunk section.
Okay.
So you would wander around. They had these big open areas where they would have this Burning Man stuff that you could see. But in addition, they had a small steampunk section.
Hmm.
And I just happened to wander into it. I had heard of steampunk, but I wasn't really that familiar with it. Wandered into this area, and that year they had the League of Steam, which is a performance group from Los Angeles. I don't think they're active anymore. And they were all dressed up like these 19th century science fiction characters, and they were doing a zombie domestication.
Oh, yes, I saw that picture.
Right. So they
They
had
had
all
all this
these
gear laid out on a table and domesticate
exactly.
your zombie.
Yeah, yeah, domesticating zombies. That was the thing. And they had all these wild gadgets, uh and they were demonstrating stuff. And there was this outfit called Obtanium Works, which is a major art studio in the steampunk world.
Hmm.
Their claim to fame is the Never Was Hall, which is a 3-story Victorian house on wheels.
Hmm.
Goes around 3 miles per hour. You can see lots of photos of it at Burning Man, cruising down the playa. And they had built this whole mythology around it, where they're emissaries from the Hibernian Steam Empire,
Of course.
which is this alternate world where Ireland is a world power. Hibernia is the traditional name for Ireland.
Oh, of course.
Right. So they have this whole Hibernian Steam Empire where they're cruising the world on behalf of I think it's the Ministry of Insanity from the Hibernian Steam Empire. So it's very, it's all tongue in cheek, of course,
Yeah, of
which
course.
makes it
But it
so much
sounds like
fun.
such fun, and
Yeah.
now it's what, 5 years later, fast forward, and now you've got the Steampunk Explorer website. I see that
Right.
you're in the newsroom of your news program, The World of Steampunk, which is a cool. It's an episode. It's like a cross between a talk show and a newscast. It's like everything you ever wanted to know about what's going on in steampunk. I guess in the last couple weeks or last couple months. I love your studio. I love the
Thank
time
you.
zones. It's very, very cool. And so now this is what you do. Are you retired from the working world, or do you still do writing and stuff, or
Oh,
what's that deal?
I'm semi-retired. I try to make a living as best I can from some freelance writing. The Steampunk Explorer earns a little bit of income, not certainly not enough for a full-time living. I do have a Patreon. If anyone wants to join my Patreon, you can kick in $1 or more a month and help keep it going. Got about 150, 200 supporters on Patreon who
Oh,
help
cool.
keep it going. It did get me one pretty decent job once where I contributed to a museum exhibition
Hmm.
on steampunk, which is still, I believe, still on tour. It's a traveling museum exhibition called Discover Steampunk. And you won't find any mention of the Steampunk Explorer, I don't think, in the exhibit, but you will see I wrote some of the panels
It seems like you kind of become an authority on this somewhat. Now, in the latest
by
episode of The
accident.
World of Steampunk, which is episode 7, I believe, you spend quite a bit of time speaking with a guest named Unwoman. And
Right.
what's interesting about her is that, I mean, you'll tell me more, but she talks about, she's a performer. I guess she plays cello and she sings, but she talks about this little looping machine that she keeps on stage with her. It's a really basic machine that kind of records a sound loop and then she plays it back and plays and accompanies herself with it. Talk a little bit about Unwoman, like where you found her and what that's all
Okay.
about.
Often part of the festivals and conventions is musical performances. And so there's a whole stable, for want of a better word, of musical acts that perform at steampunk events. And Mon Woman is one of them. And so I think her first event that she performed at was SteamCon, and her music,
SteamCon, I love that.
SteamCon. So she's classically trained musician. I mean, she has a music degree from UC Santa Cruz, so she's got serious, musical chops. And she's got a beautiful singing voice. She plays well. She's a composer.
Let me play a little bit of your interview with her, and then I picked the part where she describes this looping thing that she does, so folks you'll be able to see and hear that, and then we hear her perform. And you're right, her music is very lyrical, and she's really quite an accomplished musician. Here's a little bit of your interview with Unwoman.
But when I started in the steampunk thing, I was doing either just cello and voice or backing tracks. But my looper is the simplest looper ever. It is this amplifier, the Roland AC33. And I just plug 2 simple foot switches in it. There are some videos where you can see my foot doing the thing. But I have one pedal that starts the recording, and then you hit it again and it starts the loop. And then each time you hit that pedal after that, it toggles whether it's overdubbing or whether you're just playing over it and it's not recording it. Then there's another pedal that stops it. If you hold your foot down, it clears it. That's it. Super, super simple. And yeah, there's a video of me playing a song called Forgotten and Then Found on YouTube, which shows my feet as I do the pedals so you can see like how it works. Could something be forgotten and then found again? Prized like a trophy on a shelf.
Okay, well, I've never heard anything that sounded like you made a mistake. So when I've heard you live, and it's quite an experience.
Thank you.
You play the little riff, and it plays over and over again, and you play on top of it. It's quite something to see.
Stephen is obviously an authority on steampunk, but he's also written extensively on computers and cyber tech over 40 plus years, and he has some interesting perspective into the advent of AI. We'll talk about that next.
It's time to grab your beach reading. Your great escape is waiting at TomCranceBooks.com. Contemporary fiction in the Bud and Maggie series, sci-fi adventure in the Earth Moon Rescue series. Visit TomCranceBooks.com for detailed descriptions and links to the ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook editions. That's TomCranceBooks.com. You deserve a great escape.
We're back with Stephen Beal. We've been talking a lot about steampunk. You can see Stephen came dressed for the part today, and he joins us from his World of Steampunk newsroom. But Stephen is a lifelong career journalist. Stephen has he's written books, he's written blogs, he's written product reviews. I guess your specialty has been computers, tech, graphic design, graphic arts, and the gear that goes with that. Is that right? Am I capsulizing you correctly?
Yeah, the way I would describe it, computer applications into graphic arts is probably the best description I could come up with, which is basically what you just said. So.
And you've been doing this for 40 plus years. So, that means you've pretty much seen an evolution of everything from the first day of the internet.
Oh, yeah.
You have a story about the day that this guy wanted to introduce you to the internet for the first time. And then slowly but surely you've seen the kind of the technology grow and, kind of best itself year after year after year. I'm interested in what your opinion is about AI and whether you agree with some of the doomsayers out there who say, it might be good, but it's going to be the end of humanity as we know it.
Well, okay. I guess I'll get to that, but I think about the internet is the internet's been around for a long time. But and I did follow the progression of it, but then the big leap was the World Wide Web, which is built on top of the internet.
Got it. But we're talking 80s here, right? Pretty much.
Well, the internet was the 80s. World Wide Web, I first found out about it in 94.
Okay.
And that was really early in the World Wide Web, and it slowly grew, and then it just kind of took off. And I guess the irony there is that, and I think this is a lesson for AI too. And I'll get to AI, but in the publishing business, we thought that the World Wide Web would be just great for publishing because it would be a way to, you reach out directly to your readers. You don't have to pay for printing or distribution. It's just a great way to reach your audience. And the problem is, it was a great way for publishers to reach their audience. It made things a lot cheaper and easier for publishers, but it did the same for everybody else. And it ultimately just kind of destroyed the business models of journalism.
So you think that's a contributor to kind of the decline of newspapers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. A big one was Craigslist. So it used to be that newspapers got a big chunk of their revenue from classified advertising. Well, Craigslist took that away. And then people just got accustomed to getting their information for free. And some people think that the newspapers did it to themselves because the newspapers themselves for a long time kind of gave away their content. And the theory, I guess, was that might drive subscriptions. They could make advertising revenue, but it just hasn't worked out for reasons probably too complicated to get into here. And so now newspapers are using paywalls and they're asking people for money, but it's just the business models are still really just screwed up.
There's always going to need to be reporters. There's always going to need to be human beings who report on facts and who write them, hopefully with some kind of objective eye, not from, the way we used to learn it in journalism school, right? And I can't see AI really replacing that. I can see AI replacing like the clip library because, the AI, these programs, they scrape the internet for stuff and for statistics and stats. I think I mentioned to you before, I just to play with ChatGPT, right? Is that what it's called?
Right.
To play with that, I asked it to tell me about audiobooks. And it spit out this 500-word, really nicely written story about basically audiobooks. But it was a lot of statistics. It was a lot of stuff that I could see, stuff that I would look up on Wikipedia and other places. I didn't. I guess I didn't see that it was telling me anything new or really kind of breaking the mold of what AI. I always thought AI was basically an extension of automation. You tell it what you want it to do. It's going to keep this room at 71 degrees, but that's all changing now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I bet I would be surprised if that information you saw was 100% accurate, because the
Hmm.
problem now with AI is it gets a lot of stuff wrong.
Hmm.
So I earlier described how the internet and World Wide Web kind of destroyed the journalism business models. I think the lesson of AI, now the far future, who knows? The doomsday scenarios,
Yeah,
a lot of them are coming from the AI people themselves.
yeah,
The
yeah.
people
That's
actually
true. Now
working
that I
on it.
think of it, yeah, a lot of
Yeah, I
these
mean,
AI experts.
they're some of the most concerned people, the people who know it the best. But you really don't know. I mean, you hear both the dystopian view and the utopian view, that it's going to free us up to just do what we want, and the younger generations are going to have an advantage because they'll know how to use the tools. Nobody really knows.
Yeah, I guess that's
But
true.
but I think one of the things you can say for sure is that in these small areas where it has already found applications, and particularly art, which is what I'm, mostly interested in, art and the writing part of it, um, it's going to put commercial artists out of business. Maybe
Really.
not put them all out of business. Maybe it won't necessarily wipe out the entire field of commercial art, but it will reduce the opportunities. It will reduce employment because uh, someone who used to hire a commercial artist, some of them will continue to hire commercial artists, but a lot of them are just going to go to a Mid-Journey or a Stable Diffusion or one of these other programs and just generate it themselves. Or they might hire somebody who can generate lots of images like that really cheap.
Yeah. Wow. That
So
that potentially changes everything for that class of people. Artists and writers even.
yeah, and there have been some websites that have experimented with using AI generated copy, rating articles.
Hmm.
Now, some of them have backed, like CNET notoriously tried it. I believe it was CNET, and they had to backtrack a bit because some of their stories were, the fact checking wasn't there.
I hate to say it, but the almighty dollar, as we've seen over the years, tends to speak more loudly than a lot of things. And if it's cheaper to do that, do it that way than to hire a human being, I just am afraid that's going to happen more and more. This is the
Yeah,
portion of our interview now where you get to shamelessly promote yourself. So let's talk about your website is what again?
it's steampunk-explorer.com.
And
That's
there you see it on the
explorer.
bottom of the screen,
Okay,
steampunkexplorer.com.
right.
And the video newscast or the video program is called what?
Okay, it's called The World of Steampunk, and I have a YouTube channel and I have a Vimeo channel. And the reason I have two video channels is YouTube has a much bigger audience, so I could attract more people that way. But they just throw all kinds of ads in there, and I did not produce these with ads in mind.
Gotcha.
So if you want if you want the ad-free experience, you can watch them on Vimeo. I don't mind when they put the ads at the beginning, because you can just watch a couple seconds and then
I know,
skip
but
it.
right in the middle of the episode, it drives me crazy. And it doesn't,
Yeah,
it's completely random sometimes in the middle of a word.
my business card,
There you are. Okay, that's cool.
and then on the back I have all my social
Oh,
media
good.
links. I
Yeah.
even have the QR code.
So that takes you to the website, the QR
It takes
code.
you to my link tree.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
I have a link tree now, which with all my different links, all my different like social media and video channels and website.
I'm going to continue sweltering here in northern New Jersey. I appreciate you joining me here. I wish you a ton of luck. And folks, visit steampunkexplorer.com for more, and even more. Steve, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.